Arabic means invitation. It's from the same root as the term we use for dua, to call. And of course, dawah can be for anybody. You can even invite a Muslim to be a better Muslim. However, if we look at the use of the term in the Quran, and we look at the use of the term on the tongue of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you would definitely get the impression that the term dawah is primarily being used to invite people who are not Muslim to embrace Islam. That's how you would definitely feel the term is being used. For example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave the example. He said, my similitude or my example is of someone who invited. This is of course the Urdu word dawat. Yeah? It's from the same origin. My example is of someone who invited people to a feast. So the people who accepted that invitation, they ate from the feast. The ones who refused, they refused. Right? So once you're inside and you're eating the feast, you've accepted the invitation. That is the example of a person who accepts Islam. You don't invite them again then, do you? You may say, brother, you know, that's not a very nice way to eat with your mouth open and all the food. We don't want to see you eating. And you know, you should eat with your right hand and not with your left hand. And so you understand, this is tarbiyah. This is giving them manners. This is teaching them. But the invitation is to bring people into Islam. And this is what iERA is about. iERA is very focused on this specific task. The task of calling people who are not yet Muslim to Islam. People have approached me, sheikhs and brothers, and, oh Abdurraheem, you need to do this in iERA, and you need to do that in iERA, and then they want to get me involved in youth programs and this tarbiyah program, and I said no, as we don't deal with that. MashaAllah, there's lots of people doing those things. But I looked around and I found that in reality, there are very few, if any, organizations in the entire Muslim world, I might be wrong, who are specifically focused and dedicated to the task of bringing the message of Islam to those people who are not yet Muslim, and focusing on that as a goal. There are many organizations who do that as a sideline or a side dish, but not an organization who is focused on this task. And my years, my 20 plus years in Dawah, has made me realize that it needs focus. It needs focus. It can't be something that is left to a compartment of a particular organization or a section of a particular. It's something that needs focus. It's something that needs a level of professionalism that until today does not exist in the Muslim world. It exists with the Christians. We've done some research into, and there is a full academic research coming up on this subject of models of missionary activity. And one of the strongest models that we can observe is the Christians. I mean, they've been at it for hundreds of years. I mean, aggressively for hundreds of years. Missionary work is perhaps for Christians, many Christians, their most important activity. And I want to give you an idea. We've studied a particular organization called the Campus Crusade for Christ. The Campus Crusade for Christ, if I remember my statistics properly, the Campus Crusade for Christ operates in 190 countries across the world. It has 25,000 full-time workers. 25,000 people who work, 25,000 people who work full-time for their organization. They have 250,000 dedicated volunteers. But take a guess. I would like anyone to take a guess. How much money do you think they raised last year for their missionary activity? For missionary activity. And by the way, they raised about, was it 80 million for aid work? Something like that. 80 million US dollars they raised for, that's for aid work. Yeah, so to look after the poor and the needy and so on and so forth. So what do you think they raised for their missionary work? If they raised $80 million to help the poor and the starving and the so, what do you think they raised last year for missionary work? Huh? A few hundred million? Yeah? 670 million US dollars they raised last year. And what I want you to think about, brothers and sisters, is the proportion. The proportion of money they spend on missionary work compared to the proportion of money they spend on aid relief. 80 million on aid relief, 670 million on missionary work. How about us? What do you think our proportion is? When did you last give money to a Dawah activity? Think about it. And I want you to think about, brothers and sisters, is the position of Dawah in our religion. Where does Dawah stand? What sort of position does it hold? Because if we're Muslims, one of the very important things that we need to understand is anything or any activity or anything that we involve ourselves in, we need to know, okay, what is the position of this? How important is it? Because otherwise you might clearly give a lot of your time to something that has relatively small importance in the sight of Allah. Right? And you may give very little time to something that is very, very important in the sight of Allah. And you'd be a loser. You'd be investing a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of money in something that proportionately is not so important. That's not, I don't think a person for whom the day of judgment is a reality would behave like that. A person who knows that they will stand in front of Allah and that Allah will account them and Allah will ask them, and it is nothing except your deeds that Allah will weigh up for you. Think about that day, brothers and sisters. That's what we have to put in front of us. The day when our deeds will be weighed in scales. And whoever's scale of deeds is heavy with good, they will have a beautiful life. They will go to paradise. And whoever's scale of deeds is heavy with evil, they will go to hellfire. That's what Allah is going to weigh up for us, brothers and sisters. Our deeds. What deeds are you spending your life and your effort and your energy doing? Now I'm going to use as my reference point. Guess what I'm going to use as my reference point? What do you think? The Quran. Thank you. Can anyone think of a better reference point than the Quran? No. I'll use the Quran as my reference. Hands up who believes the Quran is from Allah. Right? We all do. Yeah? And keep your hands up if you believe the Quran is full of wisdom and guidance. Keep your hands up if you think the Quran is the book by which we should live our lives. Okay, good. That's great. Now I'm going to ask you another question. Who are the best of all the human beings? Huh? Not the doctors? The PhD holders? No, you're right. It's the Anbiya. It's the prophets. The messengers. The messengers are the best of the human beings. Indeed, they're the best of all created things. Yes, they're better than the angels. They're the best of the human beings. They're better than the angels. In fact,